there's an interesting thought. There's a lot of interesting thoughts, and we're not going to get to all of them. But there's an interesting thought here. Behold my servant whom I uphold. Do you think about Jesus very often? Do you think about Jesus needing to be upheld? Needing God to uphold. I think about myself a lot needing to be upheld. I think about my weaknesses, my insufficiencies, and I need God to uphold me. But oftentimes, do you think about God as needing to uphold Jesus? Maybe you think about the garden. Definitely, he needed to uphold Jesus. But there's other times when Jesus needed to be upheld. Many times when Jesus left and went to a desolate place to pray, don't you think that he needed to recharge his batteries? Who did he pray to? None other than God, right? My servant whom I uphold. But consider this, my chosen in whom my soul delights. In whom my soul delights. Obviously, there's some amount of pleasure in the fact that God has chosen him. In the fact that he is the servant, he is useful to him. So you think about Jesus as being a servant, and you think about him as chosen. You think about God's pleasure and Jesus's usefulness to God fulfilling that plan. In fact, so often, even without thinking about it, a lot of times, even without even thinking about it, we name Jesus Christ, don't we? That very name entails that Jesus was chosen and useful. Jesus, the Messiah, Old Testament, New Testament, Jesus the Christ, Christos, he is the anointed one, the chosen one, the intentionally one that brought forth God's intentional plan for humanity. That's the person, that's who we're talking about. But consider the purpose for which he came. Which we find in 2, the first half of, or the second half of verse 1, into verse 2, and all the way into verse 4. This is the purpose for which he came. Here, if you pay attention, you're going to see 4 he wills. He will do this, this, and this. Let's read it. I have put my spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the nations. He will not cry aloud or lift up his voice or make it heard in the street. A bruised reed he will not break, and a faintly burning wick he will not quench. He will faithfully bring forth justice. He will not grow faint or be discouraged till he has established justice in the earth, and the coastlands wait for his law. Now you see the he wills that are saturated in here. But also, if you're paying attention, there's another theme, a recurring theme. It's justice, isn't it? When Jesus comes, Jesus is going to come and establish justice. The end of verse 1, he will bring forth justice. He will, at the end of verse 3, he will faithfully bring forth justice. At the end of verse 4, until he has established justice on the earth. The very first and foremost reason as to why Jesus came was for justice. Now you might be thinking, as many of the Jews thought, about civil justice or earthly justice. And yeah, he did to a certain extent do that, but not in the way that we would expect. The justice that he was talking about, and he had more in mind, is the justice of God, don't you think? The justice of the civil justice, as we read about in Romans chapter 13, this idea where we are to submit to the authorities. Well, even in their injustices, they ask you, they force you to go 1 mile. You go 2. That's the justice that Jesus brought civilly. But Jesus established God's justice, which certainly supersedes any type of civil justice, the justice of God. Now, the justice of God and justice in and of itself, it entails punishment and reward, doesn't it? Jesus came for the justice, to establish justice, punishment, and reward. Another thing that he says that he came for is that he will not cry aloud or lift up his voice or make it heard in the streets. That we could probably spend 30 or 40 minutes on that idea in and of itself. The there's a theme as you read through the gospel accounts, often referred to as the messianic secret, where Jesus does some miracle or something like that, and he tells the person of whom this miracle was done, he says, "Go and tell no one," right? Don't tell anyone, the messianic secret. Is that what he's talking about? I'm not sure, but we do know that Jesus was fully aware of the time and his timing, and we've talked extensively about that. Maybe he's talking about his manner in which he came. Right? John came as a voice crying out in the wilderness, "Prepare the way of the Lord." And how did Jesus come? Kind of the opposite, right? Humble, riding on a donkey. "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." I mean, after all, he was born in a manger. Maybe it's talking more about his spirit, his lowliness, his humility. Nonetheless, it says about him, he will not cry aloud or lift up his voice or make it heard in the street. Maybe it's a reference to Jesus, like a lamb before its shears is silent, so he opened not his mouth. But nonetheless, we see a glimpse into who Jesus, the chosen servant of God, is to be. One who will not cry aloud or lift up his voice or make it heard in the streets. You see something else here. He will not grow faint or be discouraged till he has established justice in the earth and the coastlands wait for his law. He will not grow faint or be discouraged. Do you think there were times in Jesus' life in which he was discouraged? I think so. I do. I think when he was tagging along these 12 guys who couldn't get it through their heads who he was or what he was going to do. Or I think probably he was discouraged when he came back and for the third time he found him asleep. And here was Judas about to betray him. Are you still asleep? You think he ever got this good? Probably. We're talking about Jesus' perseverance, right? He, he did not give up. He set his face, you remember, as Matthew records for us, he set his face towards Jerusalem, knowing what his fate was going to be. He did not grow faint. He was not discouraged in his task. And what's his task? What are we talking about here? Well, the context dictates that the task at hand is that he will establish justice, right? He will not grow faint or be discouraged till he has established justice in the earth. I'm so thankful that Jesus, he never gave up. Even though if it was me, I would have thrown my hands up in the air and said, God, I tried. He did not grow weary or faint hearted. nor discouraged until justice was established. Again, God's justice, the justice of God. Hallelujah. We've got a man that, or if we call him a man, Jesus, who has this purpose in mind. Someone that will establish justice, that will allow us to come to him meek and lowly, knowing everything that we have gone through, who he himself did not grow faint. That was his purpose. But then there's this little interlude, at least I read it as an interlude in this psalm, right in the heart of it in verse 5, where we see the power of God demonstrated in what he has created. Read verse 5 with me and think about the power of God in creation. Thus says God the Lord. Thus says God the Lord, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread out the earth and what comes from it, who gives breath to the people on it and spirit to those who walk in it. This is the power of God. And the power of God, I don't know if it is demonstrated in any better way than in creation. Here, it's demonstrated, the creation, the power of God is demonstrated in three ways. Look up, look at the heavens, look at the sky. I made the sky, God said. Look at all the stars. God made the stars. Can you imagine if our atmosphere was just a little bit thinner? That's something that we don't even think about. If our atmosphere was just a little bit thinner, we'd all burn to a crisp. Or if our atmosphere was a little bit thicker, we'd all freeze to death. Have you ever thought about that? Or have you ever thought about this idea that, well, maybe you've thought about it a lot lately, but all this rain has to go somewhere. Where's it going? Where's it coming from? It all points back to God. I mean, God is you look up at the stars. How is it that for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, those stars have never moved? A few of them have died, but they're still the same. Job saw the same stars. He saw the Pleiades. He saw the Orion. He saw all those things. He saw the heavens as God created them. Second thing in creation, we'll look down at the earth. He says specifically, thus says God, the Lord, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spreads out the earth and what comes from it. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to take a leaf and to look at that leaf under a microscope. Has anybody ever done that? Or an onion? I think we did onions in high school, and then we ate them. No, I'm just kidding. Have you had the chance to see all those little tiny cells, those little plant cells? And inside those plant cells, have you had a chance to see those little tiny organelles? It blows my mind. And then you go from this organ or this cell to the next cell, and it looks almost identical to the one beside it. And this is how this thing is like. How how does it work? The third one, look up at the heavens, look down at the earth, then look around at man who's around you, who gives breath to the people on it and spirit to those who walk in it. I promise you, I promise you, from the top of my head down to the sole of my foot, that there will be no robot that is ever created that has the mind of a human. It's just not going to happen. You cannot create emotion. You can't create like the thinking of a human. And this is the thing that I'm set on. You can't create a robot that can heal itself. I get cut and I get cut bad. And I'm bleeding like a stuck pig. And then guess what? About 2 minutes later, I'm done. How does that make sense? God has created, if we just take a minute and look at ourselves, God has created us to the point where we stand in awe of Him. Man can try as much as they want, but I promise you, they will never succeed in creating something like man. That lies only in the power of God. All of this, verse 5, as we take this interlude to the power of God from the purpose of Jesus, this Messiah who's going to come. We look at the power of God. It reminds me of Romans chapter 1, doesn't it you? For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power, his divine nature, have been clearly perceived, obvious, clearly perceived, ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made. Look up. Look at the things that have been made. Look at the earth. Look at the things that have been made. Look around. Look at man. Look at the things that have been made. You see the power of God clearly perceived ever since the foundation of the world. So we are without excuse. Romans chapter 1, verse 20. The interlude of the power of God. From there, we look at verse 6, 7, and 8. And that's the purpose in 2 through 4. This is the plan. This is what God is going to do. I am the Lord. I have called you in righteousness. I will take you by the hand and keep you. I will give you as a covenant for the people, a light for the nations, to open the eyes that are blind. That may remind you of Luke chapter 2 and in verse 32 or so, when Jesus is brought into the temple as a 8-day-old baby. Simeon takes him up in his arms and he says, a light for the nations. Keep reading with me. To open the eyes that are blind, to bring out of the to bring out the prisoners from the dungeon, from the prison, those who sit in darkness. Verse 8, I am the Lord, that is my name. My glory I give to no other, nor my praise to carved idols. He says his plan is threefold here in verse 6. I have called you in righteousness. Second, I will take you by the hand. Third, I will give you as a covenant to the people. Think about that very quickly in the time that we have left. I have called you in righteousness. I have called you in righteousness. So here is God standing in righteousness, and he is calling from righteousness to this servant of his. This sets up for us the call of Jesus. His call that he has been commissioned by God is from righteousness because it comes from God. And as it extends to us, sinful humanity, it is for righteousness. It is to call us to righteousness as well. As he calls us in righteousness, the second thing that he says is, I will take you by the hand and I will keep you. Forever, Jesus will be led by God. Forever he will be led by God. You think about even in Luke chapter 4 and then even in Matthew chapter 4, you think about Jesus being led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted for 40 days. or you go towards the end in the garden, a different type of wilderness with perhaps the greatest temptation facing, led by God the whole way. I will take you by the hand and keep you, and I will give you as a covenant for the people. Now, think about that phrase and let it sink in for just 1 second. I will give you as a covenant for the people. Is, is he giving Jesus as a covenant? Is he giving this chosen servant as a covenant? Or is he referring to the light for the nations and the opening of prison? I believe, at least the way that I know that I can take this, is according to Matthew chapter 26, that Jesus gave himself as a covenant, right? In establishing the Lord's Supper, that's what he said. This is my body. This is the new covenant. Jesus was given to establish this new covenant. Jesus was given for us. Very quickly, look at this last verse in verse 9. And I want you to consider, as we think about this, God's purpose that he has in prophecy. What is the whole point of this? What's the whole point of saying that this guy is going to come, that he is going to do these things, that I have this plan for him, the purpose? Well, in verse 9, behold, the former things have come to pass, and new things I now declare. Before they spring forth, I tell you of them. These new things, before they spring forth, this is prophecy. Before they happen, I'm going to tell you about them. Why would God tell us? Why would God even, if we consider our state as worms, why would God take time to tell us what is going to happen? I think it speaks to God's care for us, doesn't it? That God cares about us. That he cares about what's going to happen to us. I think he does it so that we will have a solid foundation of faith to trust in him. So that when these things, when we see these things happen, when we see someone coming and fulfilling all these things, that we can have faith, that we can believe in God. And then, of course, when he tells us about things specific to us, that we can have hope. Here is Isaiah in desperate times, and he's telling them something better, someone better is coming. Gives them a lot of hope. And when we read about Jesus, and when we think about prophecies yet to be fulfilled, specifically being with God in glory forever, gives me a lot of hope. But without prophecy, I've got nothing. I've got no hope. No faith, no trust. But with these things, I've got all of it. God's servant, here in Isaiah chapter 42, he's coming, and he's coming with a specific purpose, with the plan of God. My question tonight is, are you a part of his plan for glory, or are you part of his plan in establishing the justice, specifically the punishment?